Alright, everyone out there in Banjo land, Mike Hedding here. Got a little banjo lesson for you today. I've had a lot of questions over the years of what kind of banjo do I have, what kind of picks do I use, what kind of capo, what kind of strap, those standard kind of gear questions, and I want to dedicate this lesson to answering those questions. So I'm calling this kind of a gear rig rundown. So the first part of the lesson is going to be kind of my acoustic setup, so how I play the banjo when I'm playing acoustic. And then the second part of the lesson is I also occasionally have to play my banjo plugged in. So I'm going to go over kind of my plugged in electric rig that I use for playing banjo. Alright, so let's start talking about my gear. And let's start with the banjo. So my banjo was made in, I believe, 2012. It was made by a local company up here in Minnesota called Neckville. Nechville. Tom Neckville is the founder of the company, and I really like this banjo. It's a takeoff on their classic kind of bluegrass model, except I had mahogany wood for the neck and resonator instead of maple, which is what the banjo normally comes with. And I liked the mahogany. I always am a big fan of J.D. Crowe. He's my favorite banjo player, and I love the tone of his banjo. Obviously, the fact that J.D. is playing it has a big part of it, but I always loved the tone he got out of that mahogany banjo that he played on the Bluegrass Album Band recordings. I really love that. So that's why I got mahogany. Nothing special. Maple sounds great as well. It's a little, sometimes people say maple's a little bit warmer sounding, mahogany might be a little bit darker, but obviously those are very subjective terms. So that's basically the main parts of my banjo. It's pretty standard. It has slightly wider string spacing. I think they actually, the Neckville people call it the J.D. Crowe spacing. So the neck is a little bit wider, which I find it works better for some stuff and not as well for other things. But for doing melodic licks and single string stuff and stuff where you need a little bit more room to move around, the wider string spacing really helps. The other thing I have on my banjo is what's called a radiused fingerboard or fretboard, where instead of having it be completely flat, it basically is slightly curved, so it kind of supposed to mimic the natural kind of curve of your fingers. So I like that. I'm used to that, and that's what I play. Otherwise, it's pretty standard, standard banjo setup with the tuners and fifth string tuner. Tailpiece is standard. I have one of the banjo or the Neckville bridges that's compensated on the third string. I like that. I think it works well for me. I've had good luck keeping the banjo in tune. And the other thing I really like about this banjo is that I've had to do very little work to it. I'm not a tinkerer. I'm not someone that likes to switch out heads and change, lots of things on the banjo. I like to focus on playing. So that's really what I like about this banjo is I can bring it to Neckville in Minnesota, once every couple years or once a year, and they can just give me a quick tune-up, and I'm back ready to go. So other than changing the strings, I really haven't messed with the banjo at all. I think their shop guy changed the head once, but again, I've had it for seven years now, and I really haven't had to do much to it, which is what I really like about it. All right, so the other thing about this Neckville banjo is it's a little bit unique construction compared to regular traditional Gibson banjos. Most Gibson banjos, these little things right here adjust the tension of the head, and on a Neckville banjo, these are actually just for show. They don't do anything. The whole head has basically this gear system inside where you can turn these two wrenches, and basically the head either tightens or loosens. Kind of the best analogy is like a mason jar. So you basically put these two little wrenches in these pins that they have inside the banjo, and you can turn it, and you'll see the heads basically spins either clockwise or counterclockwise. And what's cool about that is that it basically adjusts the head tension perfectly evenly, where I think on a traditional banjo you have to adjust all these individually. The other thing, this banjo doesn't have any coordinator rods. I'm not even sure what those are, but I know some banjos have them. It has a totally different style tone ring. I think he calls it the cyclotronic, and it's basically a bunch of these ball bearings. And I think the neck attaches differently as well. It's just a totally different design banjo. I kind of think of Tom Neckville as the mad banjo scientist, and he's always coming up with these cool new things and new designs, and that's part of why I love the Neckville banjo as well. It's a totally different design, has a lot less moving parts than a normal banjo. You can take it apart really easily. I know Tom, when he flies, he just takes his whole banjo apart and puts it in a plastic bag and brings it on the plane, which is really cool. So yeah, that's the basics of my banjo. All the other stuff is just standard. All the armrest, tailpiece, all that's just came with the Neckville banjo. I haven't replaced any of that. Let's look real quick at my picks and my strap and my capo. For my picks, my 2-finger picks, I use Dunlop .025 picks. I just bend them, and I did a whole lesson on wearing the picks. You can look at if you want to see in more detail how I wear them. But pretty standard. I use the same one on each finger. I had one set of picks for I think 12 years, and I played those for a really long time, and I've finally got a second set that I work in, but I usually use the same picks every time. For my thumb pick, I now use a blue chip JD Crow model, which I really like. I used the plastic Golden Gate picks for a long time, but they would kind of constantly move around in your hand, especially in the summer when it was really hot out and you've been playing in the sun. You get sweaty while you're playing. Nothing worse than your pick moving around mid-solo, so I really like these picks because it's just a metal, your thumb is attached to the metal part of the pick, and it seems to not move around quite as much. They're a little pricey, but I think they're worth it, especially if you have a nice banjo and you want to play it and have it sound good. Alright, so those are my picks. Now let's look at my strap. So nothing too special about the strap. I just have a basic padded strap, and there's basically two kinds of straps. I've seen one that kind of use like a clasp to clasp under these tension hoops, and the other one is just like more like a belt that you just braid over and under. So I have the second kind, the braided kind, and I just braided it each side over and under until I found the right height. The other thing I recommend for the strap is set it, and this works with whether you have the clasping ones or the braided one, start it down here rather than up here, because what that does is that when it's hanging, the strap basically helps hold the neck up a little bit. And so, the clasping ones are nice because you can take them on and off and you can adjust them all the time. The braided one, the benefit of that is basically it's kind of set it and forget it. So, it took me a while to get it to the right height, but once I do, I just tie it in place. I leave it in my case and I never have to mess with it again. The only other thing I do, just a little setup or well-being technique tip for the strap, is I put a little bit of beeswax on here, just on the points of contact, maybe once a year. And this one I just got a new one, so I haven't had to do that recently, but I had to do that on my old strap quite a bit. I hooked it under the pickup here, which I'll break down later in the lesson, and then it's just tied with this string. So again, it's pretty crude, but once you get it, it works pretty good. So that's my strap. Other basic tool I use is a capo. So I have a radius capo because I have a radius fingerboard. If you have a flat fingerboard, you want to get a flat capo. I have just a standard shove capo, nothing special. I don't like the ones that sit up here and kind of stay on personally, or stay on permanently. Personally, I don't like those as much, but a lot of people use those, and that's nice because you can just move it around. But I like this one. I just basically put it right here in my pocket when I'm not using it, when I'm playing on stage, and it just sits there, and then I can just pull it out, quick, pop it on, like that. Other things, I have my fifth string spiked, 1, 2, 3, 4 spikes put in. I had Neckville put those in, and that just is my fifth string capo. I like that more than the having to install like the track where the little thing moves around. If you play melodic style, you're going to be, fretting that fifth string a lot, so I like to have that freed up. All right, so that's my banjo and my picks, my capo, my strap. Now let's look at what's inside my case. I just wanted to show you the case I use. So I have one of these Hoffy flight cases, and I have a little insulated case cover that I have on it that I really like for those cold Minnesota winters. And I keep that on the case at all times. So I keep my banjo in here, the strap sneaks right under there. Works really well. So not too much to the case. I can show you what I've got inside it. I really like these little, I got a couple of these little medicine pill jugs on Amazon that I keep my banjo picks in. I really like that, so I'm not always searching through my case for my picks. Strongly recommend having some sort of Leatherman. Can't bring these on a flight, obviously, because it has a knife, but super handy for cutting strings, tightening, anything you need on your banjo. Use those all the time. Keep a bunch of strings, got an extra bridge if I need one. I've got some Allen wrenches for, you know, truss rod adjustments. Got some fast fret, I really like that. If you need to get one more, you know, show out of your strings, that's really handy. Got a bunch of extra picks, tuner, you know, pretty standard stuff, so nothing too crazy in the case. You know, keep a bunch of extra sets of strings. That's basically the case. Just want to show you what I use for that. Keep my capo in there as well. And then I can just pop that in there. Sneak the strap back under there. And I'm ready to go to the next gig. All right, so that's my case. All right, lastly, let's look at my electric rig. So I've got my pickup plugged in over here. I have the Neckville pickup that's called the Warp Drive, which is a dual pickup system. It uses a magnetic pickup and a piezo that I can blend together. And it's a pretty cool system and it sounds pretty good. And then I use this LR Baggs Venue pedal and then a little Fishman amp. And I don't have, obviously I'm not plugged into a whole PA system, but I normally use this amp as a monitor shooting back towards me when I'm performing, but it also works great as a little practice amp. Normally what I do is there's another XLR going to the mains, so I can turn up how much I'm sending to the mains, or I can turn up how much I'm sending to myself, which is really handy. So let me just play a little bit for you. You can hear how it sounds, and then I'll give you a couple little tone tips. You can hear it does sound a little bit electric, but usually my goal for a plugged-in banjo is to have it sound as acoustic as possible. And this Neckville pickup is the best one that I've seen or heard that allows you to crank it up pretty loud without having a lot of feedback. Other people use little mics, but those are a little bit more prone to feedback as well. So I think this Neckville pickup works really good for me. A couple little tips, I'll zoom in on my settings on each pedal. But what I like about this Venue DI pedal is I have a mute, so I can tune, which is nice. I also have a little booster, so sometimes I'll boost. I can set my boost level, so I might hit that right before I take a solo, which is nice because then my backup can be at a quieter level. You know, just like you work a microphone, obviously with a pickup you're at one volume, so that boost allows you basically to kind of move into the microphone, which is really nice. The other thing that I would strongly recommend, and this took me a while to figure out, is cut a lot of the low end. You'll see on my settings, I basically have the low end completely cranked down. And I found that helps it give it a lot more acoustic sound. I'll turn up the lows. You can hear it's kind of tubbier sounding, but it definitely sounds more like a plugged-in banjo rather than acoustic banjo, which I want, you know, just an acoustic sound, just louder. So that was a big thing for me. I think it's kind of counterintuitive. You would normally think, you know, the banjo plugged in sounds really bright, so you might initially think to turn up the lows to kind of, you know, give it more bottom end, but it's actually kind of the opposite. You want to cut the low end, which will give it a more acoustic sound. Having the dual pickup also helps. The piezo pickup is really bright. The magnetic pickup is a little bit warmer sounding, so allowing, you know, being allowed to blend those two is really helpful. So that's my main setup. Again, I'll show you my settings on each pedal, but you know, every pedal is going to be a little bit different, but I'd recommend cutting a lot of the low end. Like I said, I don't crank up the highs or anything. and pretty much I just keep my system. You know, I might adjust it slightly for a different room or something if something's really standing out, but the thing I like about the Neckville pickup is that I can kind of set it and forget it. I haven't had to change the blend at all, which is really nice, and that's super handy. So let me play just a little bit more for you. So that's my plugged-in electric setup.